some of you know, some of you actually knew NICOLA GEIGER before she passed away. So this is a woman that I met in Japan who was German and had lived through World War II as part of the resistance to the Nazis. They even made a movie about the group called the White Rose. So she had to go, it was like Schindler's List, you know, I mean, she lived it. She was only 20 years old at the time. And she'd just been through everything. I mean, she'd been tortured, interrogated, raped, you name it. It had happened many times. Anyway, so she, I met up with her. I didn't know like who she was or whatever, and but she said, well, if you ever come to Kyoto, come visit me. She was running Friends World College, which is a Quaker college that's like has campuses all over the world. And she was interestingly engaged, she worked for Amnesty International. She was in fact their specialist on human rights violations in South Korea, which at that time was very bad on human rights violations. And she was actually like, it was like this, it was very cinematic. I mean, she was engaged in like secret espionage stuff because she was trying to save the life of Kim Dae-jung. Now, you may or may not know the whole story, but eventually Kim Dae-jung became the president of South Korea, and Korea became democratized. But he was in prison at that time, and she was doing all sorts of stuff with Amnesty International to make sure that he didn't get killed. So she was like, you know, you would think someone that had like been through that themselves would want to sort of distance themselves. Like, but no. Anyway, so how this relates to challenges and what have you is, so she says, come visit me if you're ever in Kyoto. And so I was in Kyoto, I came to visit her, and she said, she said, come up to my living room here, sit down. Do you know why I wanted you to, why I invited you to come here? I said, no. And then she proceeded to tell me exactly where I was at in meditation. And what I needed to do to take the next step. Well, that was sort of surprising. But then later on, after I knew her story, she had been trained to meditate from the time that she was 3 years old. Her father had been a meditator, and they were associated with Hermann Hesse and the League of the Journeyers to the East, and this whole group of Europeans that were interested in sort of Buddhist kinds of things during the Weimar Republic. Anyway, so, I mean, she'd been trained. That's why she survived all that stuff and prospered. She had enlightenment experiences while these horrible things were going on to her. So, you know, eventually it became evident why she had this perspicacity to, you know, see through you, literally. So anyway, apropos of challenge, what she pointed out to me was that I didn't like people. And that I withdrew from people. And that I was going to have to learn to like being around people. And it was true. I had spent my entire life as a loner. I was very uncomfortable around people. what I had in her was a role model for what she was talking about. She was the first role model. Later on, I had others. But what did she do? Well, she just hung out in her house, and people would come to be with her. What kind of people? Every kind of person. The entire spectrum of humanity. From the best to the worst. The best being the Zen masters and Catholic priests. She was friends with Father Johnston, for example. And the worst being Yakuza, if you know what that is, and left-wing international terrorists, like the real deal. And everything in between would pass through her living room. And she'd give each one of them what they needed. So that was a big change in my habit patterns, that I had to learn to love to be around people and be with people. Might not seem like that big a deal, but that was a challenge.